Lila Nishmas, Bill Habastevor Abraham HaKohen. I remember, look at that. We're up to page 7 in the handout, if you have it printed out or if you have it on your screen. Just to recap, again, we're asked the basic question: why does Hashem tell Adam and Chava not to eat from the tree of life? Because they'll live forever, but wasn't that the plan to live forever? But what we started to explain is that the concern is that if they eat from the tree of good and evil that's mixed together and then live forever, they will perpetuate this good and evil being mixed together. Now, there's a couple of vocabulary words that I want to review, and then we'll move forward. When we say good and evil, we don't mean pleasant and unpleasant. We don't mean nice and mean. We mean that which demonstrates its source of godliness and that which conceals its source of godliness. That which is demonstrative of its godly source and that which is combative to its godly source. Now, from the perspective of Hashem and the angels, where God says to the angels, oh, now man is going to be like us, so why is that a bad thing? From their perspective, there is only the good and the godly. And even if they see that which is oppositional to godliness, they recognize it immediately and being separated out as being oppositional to godliness. The concern that comes with the humans ingesting the tree of knowledge of good and evil is the non-distinction between that which is good and that which is evil. Meaning it's not just good and evil, like it's two separate sides of a sandwich. It is a good and evil that is intertwined, and that becomes perpetuated by being ingested within the human being, in contrast to the perspective from Hashem and the angels, where they see that the role of, again, evil, and again, evil meaning not unpleasant or mean or nasty, but that which denies its godliness, as an opportunity for us to excavate the godliness that is contained within it. Okay, so now the Alter Rebbe is going to take us down a little bit of a side path and then hopefully tie it all together, where he talks about something you may recognize it because it's incorporated in the daily davening, which is the 11 ingredients in the Ketores. So a little background, and then we'll go forward. In the Beis HaMikdash, there were certain services that were done routinely. Of course, the most obvious is the sacrifices. There was the menorah that was lit. There were the showbreads that were laid out. And one of the other special services is called the Ketores. Ketores translates as incense. And the incense was made up of a very particular and specific ingredient list, 11 different items that were incorporated or blended together. And you read it again in the morning davening in what we call the karbonos, the introductory part of the davening. Now, in the role of the Ketores in the Beis HaMikdash was that it provided a very pleasant and soothing aroma. Now, at the most elementary level, it cleared out the bad smell from all of these animals and all of this blood and all of this burning of flesh and so on. But at a more profound level, this was more than just a deodorizer and an air clearer. It was the concept of clearing out negativity, the intensity of the power of a pure smell to reshape our mindset. I mean, today we know about this from Starbucks, that they pump in the smell. That is a trigger for alignment, for pleasure, for calm, for soothing, and so on and so forth. So the Ketores contained or reached a very deep level within the spiritual awareness of the person and in the realignment for someone who's become misaligned from the infinity of Hashem. So we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of the Ketores and then tie it back to, which is ultimately the struggle between the good, i.e. most evidently godly, and the bad, that is, that which denies its godliness. So again, if you have the handout, we're on the top of page 7. I'll read it and we'll translate and we'll talk about some of the concepts here. We find regarding the pure levaina. Now, the levaina is one of the ingredients. He translates it as spices, but it's not a spice like we think of salt or pepper or garlic salt, but it is one of the ingredients in the Ketores. And this one is pure, unadulterated levona. I don't know exactly which one of these herbs is Lavona, but what's more directly relevant is that the word Lavona is etymologically related to the word Lavan, which translates as the color white, which represents a purity. Shebiyut Aleph Samamani Hakteris, which is one of the 11 ingredients or herbs, or he translates it as spices, of the Keteris. Now, we're not here to discuss the chemical combination of these different ingredients that produce this particular aroma and that the smoke went up in this perfect column. That's really outside of our subject matter. Rather, we're looking at this sort of metaphoric, poetic interpretation. And the Alter Rebbe is calling our attention to something of an anomaly. Why are there 11 ingredients in the Ketoras? And he explains, if we had 10 or the first 10 of these, Hein Yud Netzutzi Kedusha Hamavloim Beklipas. This represents the 10 sparks, and this is a very Kabbalistic term, but I'll just read it and then we'll try to give some explanation. The 10 sparks, we'll talk about all of these words, that are absorbed in klipas. I know that's a lot of lingo, we'll come back to it. But Hayid Aleph, the 11th, he Lavoina is this Lavoina, he bechinas makif aleim, which represents this all-encompassing level, veinimis labeshus b'pnim yusam, that is not absorbed within the individual and it's not personalized. Now I know that sounds like a lot of technical talk, so let's back up here and understand. We have a general principle that we are familiar with almost intuitively, that matters that are comprised of 10 represent a whole body. We have, of course, the 10 commandments. We have 10 statements by which Hashem created the world. You may recognize this. It's quoted in Pirkei Avos. You have the 10 constant miracles that occurred in the Beis Hamikdash. So it's not just because we happen to have a place value numeric system that flips from 9 to 10. We go from single digits to double digits. The concept of the number 10 incorporates the 10 primary elements by which we can identify ourselves and also, in a certain sense, have somewhat of a discussion about the infinity of Hashem. This you may recognize in the more common Kabbalistic terminology of the 10 spheros, 10 identifiable characteristics, also sometimes called the 10 midos, 10 measurables. 3 are of the intellect, that's what Chabad is. Then we begin with our imagination, analysis, application, and that application goes to our character, and there are 7 identifiable aspects to our character. You may recognize this. Again, it's also incorporated in the daily davening. It's rooted in a verse in Chronicles that reads, L'cha Hashem hagedula v'hagevura v'hatiferes. To you, God, you have associated yourself with 7 identifiable characteristics. So 10s represent an entirety, a complete package. 7s represent things which repeat themselves. 10 becomes a complete package. So when we see something of 10, we see it as being a proper, healthy set. So when we see 11, this catches our attention because, and again, this isn't meant to be a word game, but just follow me here. The number that should come after 10 is actually 1. What do you mean? Because once you have 10, you have a package. Now you have the next 10. Just like we have with weeks. What is the 8th day of the week? It's the first day of the next week. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is a whole unit. And then 1, 2, why? Because this suggests that there is cooperation, there is continuum, there is the entirety of the package. When you have 11, it's like having something stick out. It's not participating in becoming the next set and the next ecosystem. It is something that is anomalous. It's stepped out. So when we have these 11 ketoras, these 11 ingredients in the incense, it catches our eye because it doesn't seem to fit the pattern that we are accustomed to, which the patterns are of 10. So here the Alter Rebbe says, what's happened here? That when you have 10, you have a whole unit. You have a functional unit. You have 10 parts that coalesce with one another. that interplay with one another, that operate within one another. You have a healthy sense of a system. When you have 10, you have the 10 sparks of holiness that can become invested into the klipa, into the world that tries to squash that godliness. The word klipa meaning a shell that tries to conceal and push down on the godliness. And 11 suggests that instead of beginning another system, you have this sort of almost rebellious characteristic. That's what that 11 is. And that 11 means that it has changed the makif. The word makif means to surround, but in our context, we would call it the tenor or the culture, essentially, of the entirety of this character. And it has tilted it away from holiness and into a characteristic of unholiness and ungodliness, of antagonistic ungodliness. Now the Alter Rebbe just adds that Levoina, he gam came chayes lehem. And this, the fact that it happens to be Levoina, the 11th, is Levoina, which again, I don't know exactly what herb Levoina is. That's not the relevant point in our context. But in our context, it says that one that sticks out, which is an indicator that there is not cooperation, there is not healthy ecosystem going on here. There's unhealth. There's not just diversity, which would be positive, but there's like disparity. So this outlier, this one that sticks out, but sticks out like we would say like a sore thumb, not in a healthy way, that it distinguishes itself, but it's like rebellion for the sake of rebellion. It's like stepping out of line just for the sake of not being cooperative. This characteristic stays out from the side. And this is like the kid in the class who's the troublemaker, but he never gets in trouble. He creates a stirring sense of uncooperation or non-cooperation that is disruptive, and yet it's never identified. There isn't anything that you can get him on. Okay, and for that reason, it does not join together with them. It stays separated. But in this context, it therefore, if it can remain separated, it can remain pure and it can remain identifiably godly. So remember that the sin is the eating not of the tree of evil, but it's the tree of good and evil. Meaning, if the eating of the tree is so bad, why is it called a tree of good and evil? It should be just a tree of evil, because the true disruption is that it distorts the separation between good and evil. That in the Garden of Eden, there was obvious, this is all acceptable, this one thing is unacceptable. The experience that it goes that results from eating from the tree is that we have lost the distinctions between, or the obvious pathways of what is good and what is evil. So when you have something that's an outlier from this, it can be a sign of rebellion, but if it's a rebellion away from this admixture of good and evil, you now have an opportunity to find something that can rescue you, that can extricate you from this this inappropriate intertwining. And this we hope to find in our lives, whether it's Shabbos or it's when I daven or something. We have to have some point when we reset ourselves around a certain sense of sanity, a sense of pure holiness that can allow us to not be sucked in by the rest of our life, which is a combination of good and evil. We have so much good and evil so intertwined with one another that we don't have any opportunity, or we might feel that we have no opportunity to ever be released from it. And this outlier, this 11th ingredient, suggests to us that there's something outside of that ongoing mixture. Now, here we have a potential that it could go either way. That's really sort of the problem of the consequence of this mixture of good and evil. It could be a good that is pure, that can pull us out of this convoluted mixture. If you've ever found yourself so mixed up in something and you say, where can I get some fresh air, some pure godliness? I got to go look somewhere to get some pure godliness. That's what this outlier can allow us. Or it can be, the kid, I'm not participating, I'm not being part of this, and stands off on the side. This is that separated makif, this is that separated cultured center that is accessible to us. And here, where we have the opportunity for makif, which is the general tone set, every family has it, every community has it, a business has it, a classroom has it. Any collection of people is going to have a certain tone to it. That tone is the makif. Now, the makif can also push away anything that's negative. The person who comes in and is disruptive to the culture of a business or a family or a community or whatever the communal structure is, there can be a disruptor. Now, that disruptor can push away the negative. People will work in a business where they get paid less if they like it there. People will stay in places where there may be certain limitations if they like the culture of it. It can push it away. And this becomes indicated, we don't have a visual here, but it becomes indicated in, oh my God, I lost the page here. It becomes indicated in the layout of the diagram of the makifim, where the makif, this sort of cultural side, is positioned, separated out from the inner side. Now I'm missing page 9. What happened to my page? I got page 8 and I got page 10. Where's my page 9? Oh, hold on, talk amongst yourselves for a second. I'm missing page 9. What happened to my page? Uh-oh. 1, 7, 8, 10. Okay, I don't have it. That might be the diagram. Okay, sorry about that. We'll just continue with the text for a few more minutes. Now, this makif, we said we did that already. In page 10, so now we understand what the quote, use the word fear was, that mankind would eat from the tree of knowledge. Because when mankind absorbs it into himself, he literally eats it. And again, that's the message. I mean, why are they eating from the tree of knowledge? That's just they're hungry. It's not eating in the conventional sense. I mean, they do actually ingest it, but what prompts them to eat it is not because their stomachs are grumbling. They're in the Garden of Eden. They have all of the nourishment and nutrition that they could possibly want. What is it that is the distinctive characteristic of eating the tree of knowledge as opposed to it just being there? Tree of knowledge of good and evil, again, the intermingling being the key point. Why is it that is so detrimental when the angels can know it? So we explain, because when they eat from it, they internalize it. And it's the internalization that prevents them from being able to extract the good from the evil. We know this in our own life experience. If a person gets too caught up in any kind of particularism of some downside in their life, they get so caught up in it that they don't have the ability to see that they are there to remedy it. They internalize it too much. The doctor who gets too involved with his patients, because he internalizes it so much, he can no longer be that guide from the side who can allow them who can empower the patient to find healing. Rather, they become so entrenched and trapped within it that they have no way out. And that's what happens, or that is the distinction of what happens when there is simply the presence of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and the angels seeing that and knowing that there's good and there's evil, but they remain like that makif, that culture center, who doesn't get so sucked into the whole dynamic that they have no way out, in contrast to the person that when he eats, absorbs, it literally becomes part of his flesh and blood into his internal organs, that he, the eater of the garden of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, has now so internalized this process that he has become part of it rather than being the master of it. He has internalized it in such an unhealthy way that he has no capacity to be the positive influence on it that he is intended to be. And that's the fear or concern, whatever the word is, that Hashem has, that mankind has become like us, but without the healthy detachment of the angels that permit them to extract the godliness. Rather, the person has become too entrenched in the good and evil that it saturates their very identity. And that's the distinction. Peirush, top of page 11, he has now become one like us, God is saying. Peirush Kamosh Bechinas Achdus. You do a tevara, can I gamhu aidei shetami etz hadas murav tevara avuloi hadavar mas. He's become like us, that he's absorbed it, but he's not ready to be able to separate out from it. The angels, the spiritual entities, see the good and evil, and they can extract the good from the evil. Again, evil meaning that which denies its godliness. But when a person becomes so involved in it, and anybody who's ever become overly involved in somebody else's issue, trying to help them with it, then they become so absorbed in it that they forfeit their opportunity, their capacity to help the other person extract the godliness or the healing out of their own issue. They become too personalized and involved in it. And that's the concern that God has. All right, we'll stop here. Tomorrow night, we'll learn some Parsha. And Rabbi Bergstein did agree to come again next Tuesday and continue the conversation that we started last night. And I hope this wasn't too technical. I know it's a lot of lingo, but hopefully it was helpful. Yes, Nira.
Thank you. It was fascinating.